Agriculture is a huge industry here. It's a major part of our industry, and agriculture is doing very well right now, propping up much of the rest of our business. We would like to move toward being a green industry. And I just wonder your views on what you think agriculture should do to become green.
Well, I think agriculture can't help but be green in many ways. And I think, not to flatter you before I even get to see it, but my colleague Tom Vilsack tells me that one of the things I'm going to see is that there are conservation practices happening right now. Obviously, you're trying to conserve your soil, so important in agriculture, but that has a tremendous impact on improving water quality downstream, or low tillage techniques that can be good for the farmer, but also good for air quality. So I think I'm going to see some examples of things that are win-win. And what I would simply say to farmers in Iowa is that I think there are lots more of those that probably can come more from you than from us at EPA. So I'm really interested in trying to find those places where we can work together, not be at odds with each other.
A while back, the president suggested that all federal agencies, or mandated, go through and review their regulations to see if they are modern and they are not a hindrance to business. Is EPA in the process of doing that?
Absolutely. Well, we have to. It was an executive order from the president. He asked us to do it in a way that was open and transparent. So EPA just spent the last few months actually having a website and meetings to get information from various stakeholders on which rules they thought we should review. So we have, EPA makes rules. That's sort of part of our bread and butter. That's what the agency is. It's a regulatory agency. It sets standards for clean air, clean water, clean land. So we have quite a list of rules in our history. We're looking at all of those, and we're reviewing rules going forward to try to ensure that they're not overly burdensome on business, that they give business the rules of the road, but don't step too far into their operations.
Ms. Jackson, how big is the EPA in total number of employees, and does that hinder it from making change that would be beneficial to modernization of industry that it regulates?
EPA is about 17,000 plus employees, say 17,200, 17,300. About half of those employees work in the Washington, D.C. area, more on policy and standard setting. The other half are in our regional office and our laboratories. Most people don't realize that EPA has a pretty big environmental research component, a component that does research on everything from cars to risk assessment and water quality. So we have a lot of scientists. We say we have the most scientists outside of any agency except for NASA, actually. Now, your other question is a great one. I don't classify 17,200 as small, so certainly we've grown larger. We find most of our innovation comes in our work with states in the regional offices, so the half of employees. I used to work in one of our offices in the field, but our field offices, we have a field office in Kansas City, Kansas, that handles most of the breadbasket region of the country. And I do think innovation for any organization is tough, but not impossible. And the president's really clear that government needs to work for people and needs to be nimble and mobile and deal with today's challenges, not yesterday's.
Okay, easy questions over. Now let's move to this House Ag Committee. They have been very aggressive, not necessarily toward you, but toward your department, of what they think you're doing that's anti-business, or that they want you to reevaluate. How are you? You're here, obviously, but how are you trying to respond to the criticism of your agency?
Well, I have to respond to the criticism of my agency. We're not above criticism. And first, I think some of the things they're saying, and I've told them this, so it's not a surprise, are myths. And I think part of my job is to debunk those, to get out and speak not only to them, but to their constituents. It's one of the reasons I'm here. Things like we're going to regulate spilled milk. We actually just last week finalized the regulation that exempts milk from the spill containment rules under law. Or that we've already changed the standard on dust in rural America. We're required by law every 5 years to review our fine particle standards and our coarse particle standards. We're in the middle of that review. We've made no decisions. So it's not fair to get people worried that EPA is running around over-regulating when we're really just doing our jobs. On the other hand, one thing I took from them is that communication is always good. And if you want to communicate with people, you have to go to where they are and let them see your face and let them understand that you want to know them and hear about their operations. That's part of the reason I'm here.
Do you feel like that the regulatory agency that you represent is reaching a point to where that the regulations are going to cost more than it's worth to raise them to a higher level for public health and safety? How do we find that balance between what is logical and needed by the public or that which is over-regulation, meaning that it hinders business?
Yeah. I feel like it's my job as head of the agency to ensure that each and every rule we do, and by the way, these rules don't come out of nowhere. They're required by the laws of our country, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the pesticides laws, whatever law, that's what we implement. We get our marching orders from the law. But it's my job to look at those rules as they go out for proposal, before they even get proposed to the public, and make sure that there's been a cost-benefit analysis if they're a big rule. There's a jobs analysis if it's a really big rule. We have standards for how we analyze our rules. And then they go out for public comment. Most of our rules are out 30, 60, 90 days, sometimes longer for public comment. And then we have to finalize the rule, taking into account public comment. And that really, really works. It's probably one of the neatest things about what we do. We can change our rules after reviewing comments from industry or from individuals. And so we do all of those things. And still, we might not always get it 100% right, and that's why we're reviewing our rules now pursuant to the President's order. That's the job of the EPA Administrator. And to answer your other question, I do still believe that there's work to do to protect our air and our water and our land. We have done an amazing job, and farmers have been part of this, of protecting air and water quality. We've seen advances over the 40 years of EPA and even before that, but we're not done. We know that there are still threats to our water quality from nutrients that run off in soil, not just from farm country, but suburban lawns and urban areas as well. We know that our air quality still has challenges, and we can't turn our back on that. American people wouldn't want us to. We can't do it. It's for our future generations.
I just have one more. Do you want to ask a question at this point, Patrick?
Sure. In part to Ken's question, how do you balance a little bit the trying to be an agency that regulates a steel mill in Gary and a farm in Newton, Iowa? You know, I mean, it seems like those are two such different jobs. Is there almost a need for a separate agency that would deal just with the environmental challenges of farming, so that the rules don't get confused, or so that the rules, you know, farmers don't look at some of the rules for air quality and go, well, that's just nuts. Some of this, as Ken said, is a little bit common sense. So how do you balance that as such a big agency?
Yeah, you know, it's important that with a big agency comes the ability to have regional differences. As I said, our office in Kansas City is one of our loudest voices on and with agriculture. They do a lot of work on the ground understanding, and with the NRCS. We do a lot of work in Washington with the USDA, with the Department of Agriculture. I consider Tom Vilsack a real partner in the work we do. He's a colleague, but a partner. I was thrilled that he invited me out here, especially because I'm able to come and see it through his eyes. And he's such an advocate for rural America and for farming. I don't know that you need a separate agency, but you definitely need to see sectors as quite different. And at EPA, we do. We regulate sectors as different as auto manufacturing and engines, which impacts farm country, right? Diesel engines have gotten cleaner. That actually protects the health of people in rural America as much as it does a kid on the street in a big city. So we can do that job, but it doesn't mean we have to ever be cocky about it. We do have to balance. We have to listen, sometimes more than we speak.
How much does this push your personal horizons, coming out and learning more about agriculture? Where is that in your background, and how has that been a challenge for you directing the EPA?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, I grew up in the city in New Orleans. The job I had before this was as Environment Protection Director in the state of New Jersey, which calls itself the Garden State. And if you've ever been to New Jersey, there's still a significant part of that state outside the New York Philly corridor that is quite beautiful and agricultural. So different, though. You know, we're not in Iowa. We're not the Midwest. And so I have some experience, but One of the best parts of my job, one of the honors of being the head of the EPA, is that I get to meet Americans where they are. And Americans are amazing people and resilient and strong, and they love their country. And when I go out today, I know I'm going to see that as well.
I just have one other question, and that is agriculture is watching your Chesapeake Bay Initiative quite closely because it is goal oriented to reduce sediment, to reduce other things going into the Chesapeake Bay. It seems like it's rather onerous on those states and industries who contribute to the degradation of the bay. And I wonder if you could talk about what your goal is with that Chesapeake Bay Initiative, and then if you intend to expand that out to the watershed of the Missouri and the Mississippi.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Let me give you a little bit of background on the Chesapeake, but let me start by answering your second question because I think it's the one that's foremost in people's minds. The answer is no. We know that the Chesapeake is special. The Chesapeake Bay area is special because there's a section of the Clean Water Act that specifically deals with the Chesapeake Bay. It set goals and standards. There's been a long-standing, almost 30-year agreement amongst the states and the District of Columbia, the federal government agencies on the bay, that said we were going to reduce the pollution in this bay. And we've seen some improvement, very minor. But we have, well, I won't say very minor, I'll say some improvement because I don't want to minimize the good stuff that people have done. But we need to do more. And when I became administrator, the states were already saying, you know, we were supposed to be done by now. And so we set, and they set, tougher standards on themselves. Now, you know, there's a bit of politics going on here, and now states are concerned about their budgets and also, I think, looking at the agreements that are made. And we're going to have some tough discussions with the states in the Chesapeake Bay region, hopefully to keep them at the table. We really need to clean up that bay. It is an extraordinary resource. But we don't see the same thing in other regions. What we're seeing are cooperative efforts. Iowa's a leader in this and coming together with the states, with the EPA offices in the field to try to find solutions that keep the nutrients on the farm where farmers want them, keep the soil on the farm where farmers want them, and have a tremendous impact in my hometown region, New Orleans, along the Gulf Coast. So I think there's still so much more room for cooperation and partnership. We have to hold ourselves to a standard. It shouldn't just be that we're going to work and not make sure our efforts are having an impact. But I don't think there's a need to expand the Chesapeake Bay model nationwide. And in fact, we just offered a memo to try to give some comfort in that regard to other states.